One crucial decision in a 90-minute tank battle in Normandy killed more German tank crews than enemy shells ever could. This wasn't about armor thickness or gun caliber. This was about a choice that military historians rarely discuss, but that determined whether 49,324 American tanks could defeat 1,349 German Tigers. The answer changes everything you thought you knew about World War II tank warfare. Most documentaries tell you the Sherman was inferior. They show you the statistics. The Tiger's 80mm gun that could penetrate 100mm of armor at 1,000 meters. The front armor 102mm thick that made British crews watch their shells bounce off harmlessly. They tell you about kill ratios reaching 5.74 to 1, about Tiger battalions claiming 500 Allied tanks destroyed in months. But here's what they don't tell you. By 1945, American forces had encountered exactly 4 Tiger tanks in total combat west of the Rhine after D-Day, and not a single Sherman was lost to them. Only one Pershing went down. Something doesn't add up. And when you dig into the declassified documents and wartime production records, you discover the entire narrative about tank superiority was built on a foundation that collapses under scrutiny. The real story isn't about which tank was better. It's about why that question was irrelevant from the start. Let's establish something critical right now. When the Tiger I entered service in 1942, it was genuinely terrifying. This 57-ton monster mounted the legendary 88mm KWK-36 gun, a weapon originally designed for anti-aircraft duties that proved devastatingly effective against armor. German firing trials demonstrated precision that seemed almost supernatural. 5 successive hits on a target measuring just 16 by 18 inches at 200 yards. The Sherman's standard 75mm gun couldn't penetrate the Tiger's frontal armor at any range, and according to German ballistic calculations, couldn't reliably defeat even the side armor beyond 100 meters. British tests confirmed the nightmare. Their Churchill tank's 2-pounder gun couldn't penetrate a single spot on the Tiger's armor profile. American intelligence estimated the Sherman would need to close to within 100 yards to achieve a side penetration against the Tiger's 80mm upper hull superstructure. Meanwhile, the Tiger could destroy a Sherman from over a mile away. Tank Commander Michael Whitman became legendary for a single engagement at Villers-Bocage on June 13, 1944, when his lone Tiger destroyed over a dozen British tanks, a dozen armored vehicles, and multiple anti-tank guns in a rampage that lasted minutes. By the time he died 2 months later, Whitman had claimed 138 tanks and 132 anti-tank guns destroyed. German heavy tank battalions established kill ratios that sound impossible today: 1308 to 1 for Schwerpanzerabteilung 502, 1667 to 1 for the 13th Company of Panzer Regiment Großdeutschland, 1282 to 1 for Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 103. These weren't propaganda numbers. These were recorded in unit after action reports and matched against verified losses. But now consider this contradiction that military historians struggled with for decades. If the Tiger was so dominant, why did Germany lose the tank war so decisively? The United States produced 49,124 Sherman tanks between 1942 and 1945. Germany produced exactly 1,349 Tiger the Ferned tanks over 28 months of production from April 1942 through August 1944. Add the 492 Tiger II tanks produced, and you're looking at 1,841 Tigers total. The Americans built 26 Shermans for every Tiger that rolled off German assembly lines. The Soviets added 84,070 T-34 tanks to the Allied arsenal. Even the British produced thousands of Cromwells and Churchills. The sheer disparity in numbers was so extreme that it created an entirely different kind of warfare than what either side had anticipated. German tank commanders later admitted that the psychological impact of facing endless waves of Allied armor was more devastating than any single tactical disadvantage. A Tiger crew might knock out 5, 10, even 15 Allied tanks in a single engagement, only to watch more appear on the horizon. The mathematics of attrition warfare favored the side that could replace losses faster than they accumulated, and in that equation, Germany never had a chance. The production numbers reveal something even more interesting when you examine them closely. Sherman tank manufacturing was spread across multiple facilities: Lima Locomotive Works, Pressed Steel Car Company, Pacific Car and Foundry Company, Fisher Tank Arsenal at Grand Blanc, Detroit Tank Arsenal, and others. The M4A1 model with a radial engine and cast hull was built by 3 factories producing 6,281 units. The M4A2 diesel-powered version came from 5 plants churning out 8,053 tanks. The M4A3 with its Ford V8 engine reached 1,690 units from Ford alone. The standard M4 hit 6,748 tanks across 5 factories. The M4A4 reached 7,499 units, all from Detroit Tank Arsenal. This wasn't just mass production. This was synchronized industrial warfare on a scale that had never been attempted before. American factories standardized parts across models to such an extreme degree that crews could cannibalize one Sherman variant to repair another, even if they were different submodels. A loader could swap ammunition racks between an M4A1 and an M4A3. Driver could pull tracks from an M4A2 to repair an M4. This interchangeability meant that battlefield maintenance became exponentially more effective. Contrast this with Tiger production, which took place almost exclusively at Henschel's facility in Kassel, with turret assembly handled by Wegmann, also in Kassel. When Allied bombers targeted these facilities, German heavy tank production didn't slow, it nearly stopped. By 1944, maintaining Tiger production required cannibalizing damaged hulls and turrets sent back from the front for major repairs. The final contract for 54 Tigers involved rebuilt units, not new production. Here's where the conventional wisdom about tank combat starts to crumble. Most analysis of Sherman versus Tiger engagements focuses on one-on-one duels, as if World War II was a series of medieval jousts between armored knights. But American doctrine never envisioned the Sherman operating alone. U.S. combined arms tactics integrated tanks with infantry, artillery, tank destroyers, and close air support into a coordinated system where each element compensated for the other's weaknesses. When a Sherman platoon encountered a Tiger, standard procedure wasn't to charge forward in a suicidal frontal assault. It was to call in artillery support, while tank destroyers equipped with 90mm guns maneuvered into position. The M36 tank destroyer mounting the 90mm M3 gun could penetrate the Tiger's front plate at 1,000 meters using standard ammunition, and from beyond 2,000 meters using HVAP rounds. American artillery doctrine emphasized rapid, coordinated fire missions that could bring multiple battalions to bear on a single target within minutes. The forward observer system that American forces perfected meant that even a lone infantry squad could radio coordinates and have shells landing within 90 seconds. German commanders repeatedly noted in their reports that American artillery was the most dangerous weapon they faced, more terrifying than tanks, more effective than airstrikes. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel wrote to his wife during the Tunisia campaign about his shock at how American artillery operated. Observation: planes directing fire from numerous batteries onto every worthwhile target throughout the combat zone. After Normandy, Rommel added that American artillery superiority and their outstanding ammunition supply completely overwhelmed German defensive positions. The arithmetic of combined arms created a tactical situation that German forces found nearly impossible to counter. Let's examine a hypothetical but realistic engagement based on actual battle reports from Normandy. A German heavy tank company with 4 operational Tigers establishes a defensive position along a key road junction. The Tigers are positioned in hull-down positions with excellent fields of fire, covering 1,500 meters of open ground. American reconnaissance spots the position and radios coordinates to the battalion commander. Within 3 minutes, American 155mm artillery begins ranging shots. Within 7 minutes, 3 battalions of 105mm howitzers join the barrage, firing at a rate of 4 rounds per minute per gun. Each artillery battalion has 12 guns, meaning 144 shells per minute are impacting the Tiger positions. The Tigers can't move without exposing themselves to the Sherman tanks that have taken up firing positions at maximum range. They can't stay in place without being pounded by artillery that's systematically destroying their cover and obscuring their vision with smoke and dust. Tank destroyer platoons with M10s and M36s are moving into flanking positions through covered approaches, identified by aerial reconnaissance conducted that morning. P-47. Thunderbolt fighter bombers armed with 500-pound bombs and rockets are 5 minutes out. The Tigers might achieve local fire superiority for 10 minutes, perhaps destroying 3 or 4 American tanks. But the tactical situation is unsustainable, and every German tank commander knew it. The only question was whether to withdraw before the artillery found the range or risk destruction, trying to inflict maximum casualties before being overwhelmed. Most people don't realize that Allied air superiority transformed tank warfare in ways that statistics about armor penetration completely miss. By mid-1944, the Luftwaffe had been effectively eliminated from the battlefield over Western Europe. Operation Point Blank and Big Week in February 1944 had systematically destroyed German aircraft production facilities and killed so many experienced pilots that replacements survived mere hours in combat. The result was that German armor operated under constant threat of air attack, while Allied tanks could call in close air support with confidence that friendly aircraft controlled the skies. The Hawker Typhoon proved particularly devastating. Armed with 4 20mm cannons and either 8 60-pound rockets or 2 1,000-pound bombs, Allied pilots developed tactics for attacking armored columns that maximized psychological impact, even when actual kills remained limited. The P-47 Thunderbolt mounted 850 caliber machine guns and could carry up to 2,500 pounds of bombs, creating a multi-role platform that could strafe infantry, suppress anti-aircraft positions, and crater roads to trap retreating columns. German tank crews described the experience of being caught by Allied fighter bombers as a unique kind of hell. The roar of engines, the scream of diving aircraft, the whistle of rockets, all while trapped inside a metal box that could become a crematorium if anything penetrated the thin top armor. Intelligence reports from German prisoners captured after the Falaise Pocket disaster repeatedly mentioned air attacks as the primary cause of equipment abandonment. Tanks that were mechanically functional were simply left behind by crews who had endured days of constant air attack and lost the will to continue. The maintenance and logistics differential between American and German armored forces represented another crucial advantage that rarely gets proper recognition. Sherman tanks were designed from the beginning with field maintenance in mind. The engine could be removed and replaced by a trained crew in under 4 hours using standard tools. Track tension adjustment required 1 wrench and could be completed in 15 minutes. The volute spring suspension was robust and easily repairable even under field conditions. Compare this to the Tiger's overlapping road wheel design, which required removing the outer wheels to access inner wheels for maintenance, a process that could take days and required specialized equipment. In muddy or freezing conditions, the Tiger's road wheels had a tendency to freeze together, completely immobilizing the tank until crews could thaw them, usually by lighting fires underneath. The Tiger weighed 57 tons, which meant that any tank suffering mechanical breakdown near or at the front lines often couldn't be recovered because no German vehicle had sufficient capacity to tow it. Allied forces established comprehensive tank recovery and repair systems that could evacuate damaged vehicles within hours and return them to combat within days. During Operation Torch and the subsequent North African campaign, American maintenance units pioneered techniques for rapid field repair that were later codified in technical manuals and training courses. British Remy workshops in Normandy processed hundreds of damaged Shermans, repairing everything from thrown tracks to blown turrets, creating a sustainable cycle where the same tanks returned to battle multiple times. A Sherman knocked out by a German anti-tank gun might be back in action within 48 hours. A Tiger suffering the same damage would likely be scuttled or captured because German recovery capabilities couldn't extract it from the battlefield before Allied forces overran the position. Reliability represented perhaps the most critical difference between the Sherman and Tiger, and it's here that the technical specifications in pre-war design documents determined the outcome of entire campaigns. American automotive engineers who came from Detroit's mass production industry brought expertise in building engines and transmissions that could operate for thousands of hours with minimal maintenance. The Sherman's Continental R975 radial engine, derived from aircraft power plants, was proven technology that delivered reliable performance across all climate conditions. The Ford JV8 used in the M4A3 variant produced 500 horsepower and could operate for 400 hours between major services when properly maintained. Soviet tank commanders who received Shermans through Lend-Lease praised their reliability extensively. Dmitry Loza, a battalion commander of M4A2 Shermans, noted that track service life lasted approximately 5,000 kilometers, twice as long as Soviet T-34 tracks. During the Soviet-Japanese War of 1945, Both M4A2 and T-34-85 tanks made a brutal march through the Gobi Desert and over the Greater Khingan Mountains. The reliability proved nearly identical, with 87% of Shermans completing the operation compared to 87% of T-34-85s, but here's the crucial detail that changed everything. 15 to 20 tanks out of a 50-tank formation would require maintenance or repair during a single day's march of 30 to 40 miles. This was normal for even the most reliable tanks. The difference was that Sherman crews could complete most repairs in hours and return their tanks to service. Tiger crews faced mechanical nightmares that could sideline their tanks for days or weeks. The Tiger's transmission required constant attention to prevent catastrophic failure. The Maybach-Olvar gearbox was an engineering masterpiece, offering 8 forward gears and 4 reverse gears with precision that allowed skilled drivers to maneuver the 57-ton monster with surprising agility. But that complexity came at a terrible cost. The transmission was the single most common point of failure on the Tiger, and replacing or repairing it required removing the turret. Field workshops rarely had the equipment or expertise to perform this work under combat conditions. The Tiger's fuel consumption was equally problematic. Modern demonstrations with the preserved Tiger 131 at Bovington Tank Museum record fuel consumption of approximately 8 gallons per mile during low-gear operation. Combat consumption would vary based on terrain and speed, but the Tiger's operational range of 110 to 195 kilometers on roads and 85 to 110 kilometers off-road meant that every mission required careful fuel planning. As Germany's oil situation deteriorated through 1944 and 1945, many Tigers were simply abandoned because no fuel existed to operate them. Analysis of Tiger losses reveals that 38% of all Tigers lost were classified as non-combat losses, including 96 abandoned, 50 bogged down, 158 immobilized, a 30 unrepairable, and 57 lost due to fuel exhaustion. Only 40% of Tiger losses occurred in direct combat. The remaining 22% were unknown or other causes, including friendly fire, road accidents, and units that simply surrendered intact Tigers when surrounded. The myth of the invincible Tiger starts to look very different when you realize that more Tigers were lost to mechanical failure, fuel shortages, and logistics collapse than were destroyed by enemy fire. Crew survivability statistics reveal another dimension of the Sherman versus Tiger question that challenges popular assumptions. For every Sherman knocked out, approximately 1 crew member was killed and 1 or 2 wounded, according to multiple U.S. Army studies. British casualty rates for Sherman crews showed similar numbers, about 1 killed and 1 wounded per tank loss. Soviet Sherman crews reported comparable figures, with battalion commander Dmitry Loza noting that 1 to 2 crew members became casualties per knocked-out tank, depending on where the shell struck. The Sherman provided a hatch for almost every crew member, with hatches positioned directly above their stations and spring-loaded to ease their weight. This design feature, combined with a belly hatch under the assistant driver, gave crews multiple escape routes even when under fire. The Sherman's crew survivability was further improved by the introduction of wet stowage ammunition racks in early 1944. The M4A375 variant repositioned ammunition from vulnerable sponson positions to the floor, where each 10-round rack was surrounded by 3 sealed chambers filled with water, or ethylene glycol. If an enemy shell penetrated an ammunition rack, the liquid would disperse and slow or prevent catastrophic ammunition fires. U.S. Army Operations Research Office study, RT-117, documented the transformation, pre-modification. Shermans burned in 60 to 80% of penetrating hits, while wet stowage variants burned in only 10 to 15% of cases. This single modification multiplied American armored effectiveness invisibly. A tank battalion with 50 Shermans suffering 30 penetrating hits would lose only 3 to 5 tanks to fire with wet stowage, compared to 18 to 24 tanks with dry storage. The battalion could maintain combat effectiveness instead of requiring complete reconstitution. German intelligence never recognized this modification's significance because the liquid-filled containers looked identical to standard ammunition storage from the outside. Tiger crew casualties proved more difficult to track, but available data suggests higher losses per tank destroyed, particularly due to the difficulty of escaping the Tiger's confines when the tank was damaged, and the limited evacuation routes available to the crew. Training represented another critical advantage that American forces leveraged throughout the war. Sherman crews underwent standardized training programs that emphasized combined arms cooperation, radio communications, and tactical flexibility. Crews trained together for months before deploying, developing the coordination and trust necessary to operate effectively under combat stress. American doctrine emphasized initiative at the platoon and company level, trusting junior officers and NCOs to make tactical decisions based on battlefield conditions rather than waiting for orders from higher command. This contrasted sharply with German training, which had been excellent early in the war, but deteriorated badly as experienced instructors were sent to combat units to replace casualties, and training time was compressed to rush replacements to the front. Tiger crews initially received extensive training at specialized schools like the facility at Paderborn, where the Panzerersatz- und Ausbildungsabteilung 500, Tank Replacement and Training Battalion 500, provided comprehensive instruction on the Tiger's systems. Crews practiced everything from engine repair and gunnery to coordinated battlefield tactics using simulators, mock-ups, and live-fire exercises. The Tiger Fibel, an 88-page illustrated manual filled with technical information and training guidance, helped standardize instruction across units. But by 1944, the German training system had collapsed under the pressure of escalating casualties and fuel shortages. New Tiger crews arrived at the front with minimal training, often having practiced in outdated Panzer III or Panzer 38T tanks rather than actual Tigers. The result was predictable. Inexperienced crews made tactical mistakes, failed to perform proper maintenance, and lacked the battlefield awareness necessary to survive in the increasingly hostile environment of late war combat. The doctrine of how to employ tanks revealed fundamental differences in American and German military philosophy that determined outcomes at operational and strategic levels. American armor doctrine evolved rapidly during the war, moving from pre-war concepts of infantry support and breakthrough exploitation toward a more flexible combined arms approach. By 1944, American armored divisions operated as balanced forces capable of multiple missions: exploitation of breakthroughs, encirclement of enemy forces, rapid advances to secure objectives before the enemy could establish defenses, and sustained combat against prepared positions when necessary. The Sherman's design reflected this doctrinal flexibility. It was fast enough to exploit breakthroughs, reliable enough to sustain long advances, and produced in sufficient numbers that commanders could accept losses without losing operational capability. German doctrine for employing Tigers focused on using their superior firepower and armor protection to anchor defensive positions or provide fire support for offensives by medium tank units. Tigers were organized into heavy tank battalions, Schwerpanzerabteilung, that operated as independent formations attached to corps or army-level commands. This organizational structure theoretically allowed German commanders to mass Tigers at critical points, achieving local superiority that could blunt Allied attacks or spearhead German counteroffensives. In practice, this approach suffered from severe limitations as the war progressed. Tiger battalions rarely operated at full strength due to mechanical attrition, fuel shortages, and combat losses. The decision to concentrate Tigers in elite independent battalions meant that most German formations had no heavy tanks at all, limiting their tactical flexibility when facing Allied combined arms teams that integrated medium tanks, tank destroyers, artillery, and air support into every operation. Strategic mobility considerations further tilted the balance toward American armor in ways that tactical comparisons miss entirely. The Sherman was designed to be shipped across oceans in the holds of cargo vessels, unloaded at ports using standard crane equipment, driven onto railway flat cars using standard ramps, and transported over bridges and roads without exceeding weight limits that would cause structural failure. This logistical consideration drove many design decisions that superficially appeared to limit combat effectiveness, but actually enhanced strategic value. The Sherman's 30-ton weight meant it could use virtually any bridge in Europe without risk. The Tiger's 57-ton weight required engineers to conduct careful surveys of bridge capacity before movement, and many bridges simply couldn't support Tiger crossings at all. The Tiger was too wide for standard railway flat cars, requiring crews to remove its combat tracks and install narrow transport tracks. a time-consuming process that often delayed critical movements. A Sherman brigade could load onto ships in American ports, cross the Atlantic, unload in England, cross the Channel on LST landing craft, drive off the beach, and advance to contact with the enemy, while Tigers were still being transported by rail from depots to the front. This advantage in strategic mobility allowed American commanders to concentrate armor at decisive points faster than German forces could respond, creating local superiority even when overall numbers were roughly equal. The ability to rapidly shift armored units between sectors meant that American forces could probe German defenses, identify weak points, mass overwhelming force at those points, achieve breakthrough, and then exploit before German reserves could counterattack effectively. The economic dimension of tank warfare ultimately determined the outcome more decisively than any comparison of technical specifications could predict. The United States spent approximately $6 billion on tank production between 1941 and 1945, while spending $36 billion on aircraft production during the same period. This reflected a conscious strategic choice to prioritize air power and combined arms warfare over attempts to match German tanks on a one-for-one technical basis. Germany faced increasingly severe resource constraints that forced difficult choices between competing priorities. Shortages of cobalt, copper, aluminum, and most critically, oil and manpower prevented German industry from matching Allied production, even when considering Germany's substantial industrial capacity and skilled workforce. The Tiger required rare materials that were increasingly difficult to obtain, as Allied strategic bombing disrupted supply chains, and raw material sources fell under Allied control. The Tiger's final drive, for example, was supposed to be manufactured from specific steel alloys, but material shortages forced the use of cruder metals that frequently failed after only 150 kilometers of operation. By late 1944, many German tanks were being completed with components that didn't meet design specifications because the specified materials simply weren't available. This created a vicious cycle where reduced reliability led to higher maintenance requirements, which consumed resources and manpower that could have been used to produce more tanks or support other military needs. Meanwhile, American industry operated with essentially unlimited access to raw materials, energy, and labor. Factories could run multiple shifts around the clock. Workers earned good wages that motivated productivity, and the transportation infrastructure that delivered materials to factories and finished tanks to ports operated without disruption from enemy action. The personnel quality and morale factors represented yet another advantage that American forces leveraged effectively. Sherman crews knew they were part of a vast military machine that provided excellent support in every dimension. Maintenance units could repair damaged tanks quickly. Supply chains delivered ammunition, fuel, and spare parts reliably. Medical services evacuated wounded crewmen rapidly and provided world-class treatment. Even the mail delivery system worked efficiently, allowing crews to maintain connections with families back home and receive packages containing food, toiletries, and small luxuries that made life in combat more bearable. German tank crews by 1944 operated under increasingly desperate conditions. Supply chains broke down repeatedly, leaving units short of ammunition, fuel, and spare parts. Wounded crewmen faced long delays in medical evacuation, as Allied air superiority made daylight movement suicidal and forced all logistics to operate at night over congested roads. Mail from home arrived sporadically, if at all. The Wehrmacht's elaborate replacement and training system that had worked well early in the war collapsed under the pressure of multi-front attrition, leaving units filled with poorly trained replacements who lacked the experience and cohesion of veteran crews. The psychological impact of fighting a losing war against opponents who possessed overwhelming material superiority cannot be overstated. Tiger crews might win individual engagements, destroying multiple Allied tanks with minimal losses, only to receive orders to withdraw because the tactical situation had become untenable. The knowledge that every victory was temporary, that the enemy would return in greater numbers with better support, and that German defeat was ultimately inevitable, corroded morale in ways that technical superiority could never compensate for. The tactical adaptations that American commanders implemented based on combat experience demonstrated the institutional learning capacity that gave Allied forces a crucial edge. After initial encounters with Tigers and Panthers revealed the limitations of the Sherman's 75mm gun, American forces developed specific tactics to maximize effectiveness while minimizing exposure to German tank fire. Now we need to address the central myth that has dominated tank warfare discussions for decades, the idea that Allied tanks needed 5-to-1 numerical superiority to defeat a single Tiger. This claim appears frequently in popular histories, often attributed to American tactical guidance or training documents. But extensive searches through actual World War II combat records reveal no statistical basis for this ratio in any theater of operations. The myth likely originated from misunderstanding tactical doctrine that recommended multiple tanks working together to engage enemy armor from different angles, or from cherry-picking specific engagements where local circumstances created temporary disadvantages that weren't representative of typical combat. Research by military historians, including Stephen Zaloga, has systematically debunked this myth by analyzing actual engagement records. In most recorded tank versus tank battles, the critical factor determining outcomes was which side spotted the other first and achieved first hits. Well-trained crews with good tactical positioning could ambush and destroy superior tanks by shooting first and shooting accurately. Panthers and Tigers fell prey to Sherman attacks from the side or rear with depressing regularity when American crews achieved positional advantage. The myth also ignores that the vast majority of tank casualties in all armies resulted from anti-tank guns, not other tanks. A Sherman was more likely to be destroyed by a hidden 75mm PK-40 anti-tank gun than by a Tiger tank, simply because there were vastly more anti-tank guns in typical defensive positions than there were Tigers in the entire theater. The Sherman's design was optimized for the threats it would actually face: anti-tank guns, machine gun nests, bunkers, infantry positions, rather than the rare encounters with heavy German armor that dominate popular imagination. Let's examine specific battles that reveal the reality of Sherman combat effectiveness. During Operation Cobra, the breakout from Normandy in late July 1944, American armor spearheaded advances that shattered German defensive lines and created the conditions for the Falaise Pocket encirclement. Sherman tanks operating as part of combined arms teams advanced rapidly through German positions, bypassing strong points that would be reduced by following infantry and maintaining momentum that prevented German forces from establishing coherent defensive lines. The tactics worked not because Shermans could defeat Tigers in duels, but because the operational approach rendered such duels irrelevant. German armor that attempted to counterattack was engaged by artillery before it could reach effective range, harassed by fighter bombers that forced dispersal and concealment, and flanked by American armor that used superior mobility to avoid frontal engagements while seeking advantageous positions. During the advance across France in August 1944, General George Patton's Third Army advanced hundreds of miles in days, outrunning supply lines and creating operational chaos in the German rear. This was only possible because Sherman tanks were reliable enough to sustain continuous operations and numerous enough that mechanical breakdowns didn't halt the advance. Compare this to German operations where even successful tactical counterattacks frequently stalled because Tigers and Panthers broke down faster than they could be repaired. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 demonstrated both the strengths and limitations of American armor doctrine. German forces achieved tactical surprise and local superiority in the initial offensive, destroying substantial numbers of American tanks and overrunning unprepared positions. But the German advance stalled within days as fuel shortages, mechanical breakdowns, and American artillery fire disrupted the offensive timetable. American tank units that had been pushed back in the initial assault reorganized rapidly, absorbed replacement vehicles from the seemingly bottomless reserves available to Allied forces, and counterattacked effectively once German momentum was exhausted. The Tiger tanks that participated in the Ardennes offensive achieved local tactical successes but couldn't overcome the fundamental operational and strategic advantages that American forces possessed. The air-ground coordination that American forces perfected during the EO 1944-1945 campaigns represented a force multiplier that technical specifications couldn't quantify. Forward air controllers riding in tanks equipped with VHF radios could communicate directly with fighter bomber pilots, requesting attacks on specific targets and receiving real-time reports of enemy positions ahead. The system worked so effectively that Patton's Third Army and Otto Wayland's 99th Tactical Air Command developed procedures for armored column cover, where aircraft ranged ahead of advancing tank formations, attacking enemy positions before ground forces arrived, and screening flanks against counterattacks. P-47 Thunderbolts armed with bombs and rockets became the most feared weapon in the American arsenal, according to German prisoner interrogations. The psychological impact of knowing that any concentration of vehicles would draw air attack within minutes forced German forces to disperse, move only at night, and abandon equipment that broke down rather than attempting repairs that would attract airstrikes. This created what modern military theorists call a kill chain advantage, the ability to detect enemy forces, communicate their location, and direct lethal force against them faster than the opponent could complete the same process. Sherman tanks equipped with excellent radios and operating within a sophisticated command and control network could call for support and receive it in minutes. Tiger crews, even when technically superior in direct combat capabilities, often fought blind, unable to request effective support, because German command and control systems had broken down under the pressure of Allied operations tempo and overwhelming firepower. Here's what truly decided the tank war in Western Europe distilled to its essence. The Sherman wasn't a better tank than the Tiger in any direct technical comparison. Gun for gun, armor for armor, the Tiger held decisive advantages. But war isn't decided by technical comparisons. It's decided by the integration of all combat power towards strategic objectives. The Sherman represented American industrial might, logistical capability, tactical flexibility, and combined arms doctrine synthesized into a single weapon system that was good enough in every respect, while being available in numbers that made tactical losses acceptable. The Tiger represented German engineering excellence applied to creating a technically superior weapon that couldn't be produced in sufficient numbers, couldn't be supported logistically in the field, and couldn't overcome the systemic advantages that Allied forces brought to every engagement. A Sherman crew knew that if their tank was knocked out, another Sherman would be available tomorrow. They knew that artillery support was one radio call away. They knew that air superiority meant their movements would be supported, while enemy movements would be attacked. They knew that mechanical problems would be fixed by competent maintenance crews with adequate parts and tools. This knowledge translated into aggressive tactics and sustained operational tempo that ground down German resistance through cumulative pressure that never relented. Tiger crews knew the opposite, that losses couldn't be replaced, that support might not arrive, that mechanical failures could mean abandoning irreplaceable equipment, and that the strategic situation was hopeless regardless of tactical successes. This knowledge translated into defensive tactics and declining morale that prevented effective exploitation of technical advantages. The strategic implications of the Sherman versus Tiger comparison extend far beyond World War II. The lessons about industrial capacity, logistics, reliability, and combined arms integration remain relevant in modern military planning. The United States military continues to emphasize platforms that prioritize reliability, maintainability, and logistics over maximum technical performance in single-mission parameters. The M1 Abrams tank reflects this philosophy. It's not the most heavily armored tank in the world, not the fastest, not mounting the largest gun, but it combines good performance across all parameters with exceptional reliability and maintainability that allow sustained operations. The U.S. military's investment in logistics infrastructure, maintenance capabilities, and command and control systems reflects institutional learning from World War II experiences. Modern American doctrine emphasizes information superiority and rapid decision-making cycles that allow forces to operate inside opponents' decision loops, achieving positional and temporal advantages that matter more than direct technical comparisons of weapons systems. The F-35 fighter jet program, for all its controversies, reflects similar thinking, prioritize sensors, networking, and information superiority over raw speed or maneuverability, because modern combat is won by detecting and engaging enemies before they can respond effectively. Critics who focus on technical specifications miss the broader point that wars are won by systems, not individual platforms, and that the Sherman's victory over the Tiger validated approaches to military power that continue to shape defense policy today. Final analysis reveals uncomfortable truths about military history and how popular culture distorts our understanding of what actually determines combat outcomes. The Tiger tank achieved legendary status because it represents everything we want to believe about warfare. That superior technology, individual skill, and tactical excellence can overcome material disadvantages. The reality is bleaker and less romantic. The Sherman won not through superior dueling performance, but through overwhelming industrial production. Efficient logistics, reliable performance, and integration into combined arms systems that rendered individual technical comparisons largely irrelevant. American tank crews didn't need to defeat Tigers in fair fights. They needed to destroy German forces' ability to resist through cumulative pressure, applied across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The artillery barrage that destroyed the Tiger before it could engage. The fighter-bomber strike that forced it to disperse and hide. The logistics failure that left it without fuel. The mechanical breakdown that couldn't be repaired because maintenance units lacked parts and the strategic situation made recovery impossible. These factors killed more Tigers than Sherman guns ever did, but they don't make for dramatic stories. We remember Wittmann's charge through Villers-Bocage because it fits our narrative preferences. We forget the thousands of abandoned Tigers littering roadsides from Normandy to the Rhine, because mechanical failure and fuel exhaustion don't create compelling myths. We remember the kill ratios and the technical specifications because they're quantifiable and seem objective. We forget that those same Tigers with their impressive statistics were on the losing side, and that their technical superiority didn't prevent comprehensive defeat. The Sherman versus Tiger question was answered conclusively by 1945. Though popular culture has spent 8 decades refusing to accept the verdict, the answer isn't that the Sherman was secretly better than we thought. The answer is that the question was wrong from the start. Asking which tank was superior is like asking whether a hammer or a saw is the better tool. The answer depends entirely on what you're trying to build and what resources you have available. The United States needed a tank that could be produced in massive numbers, shipped across oceans, maintained in the field by crews with basic mechanical training, operated reliably across all terrain and climate conditions, and integrated into combined arms teams with infantry, artillery, and air support. The Sherman fulfilled all those requirements adequately. Germany needed a tank that could overcome Allied numerical superiority through technical excellence, achieve local tactical victories that could be exploited operationally, and restore initiative to German forces on the defensive. The Tiger failed to meet those requirements despite its impressive technical specifications because it couldn't be produced in sufficient numbers, couldn't be supported logistically, and couldn't overcome the systemic advantages that Allied forces possessed. The tank war was decided not by which vehicle had thicker armor or a more powerful gun, but by which army could sustain operations through superior industrial capacity, logistics, training, doctrine, and integration of all combat power towards strategic objectives. On every dimension that actually mattered, American armor, supported by the vast apparatus of Allied military power, proved decisively superior. The Sherman's victory over the Tiger wasn't a triumph of technical excellence. It was a validation that in modern warfare, good enough in sufficient numbers beats technically superior but too few every time. One final revelation deserves emphasis because it changes how we should understand this entire historical episode. By mid-1945, American forces had largely stopped encountering Tigers not because they had destroyed them all in combat, but because Germany had stopped being able to field them. The Tigers that survived were abandoned when their units surrendered or ran out of fuel. The myth of the mighty Tiger persists because we focus on its brief period of battlefield dominance in 1943-1944 and ignore its comprehensive failure as a weapons system when evaluated against the actual requirements of the war Germany was fighting. The Sherman persists in historical memory as inadequate because we judge it against standards it was never designed to meet, ignoring its stunning success when evaluated against its actual design requirements and operational employment. The real story of the tank war isn't about which machine was better. It's about how industrial might, logistical excellence, and combined arms integration defeated technical superiority so thoroughly that by war's end, the vaunted Tigers had become mere footnotes to Allied victory, abandoned hulks littering the highways of a defeated Reich. That's the truth that popular culture struggles to accept. But it's the truth that determined who won the war and why. The Sherman didn't need to be better than the Tiger. It just needed to be good enough, and available in such overwhelming numbers that German forces drowned under the weight of American production. while their own irreplaceable Tigers broke down, ran out of fuel, and ended the war as monuments to the limits of technical excellence without adequate resources to sustain operations. That was the decision made in 1942, when American planners chose mass production over technical perfection, and that decision won the war more decisively than any single tank battle ever could.